Welcome to For Better or For Court, Family Law in New Jersey.
Welcome back to For Better or For Court, Family Law in New Jersey with Ms. Alix Claps. Alix is a partner at Heymann and Fletcher and a certified matrimonial law attorney who helps New Jersey families handle divorce, custody, and complex family matters with clarity and care. I'm Evan Mack, and today we're talking about business ownership, specifically what happens when one or both spouses own a business that marriage ends in divorce. Ms. Alix, welcome.
Hi, Evan. How are you?
Oh, well. So, Alix, is a business automatically considered marital property in New Jersey divorce?
As always, it depends. Is the business jointly owned? Was the business started during the marriage? Was the business started before the marriage and continued during the marriage? All of those are considerations for the parties and the court when you're dealing with a business that is related to a divorce in one way or another.
So how does the court determine what portion of a business is subject to equitable distribution if it was started before the marriage?
So if it was started before the marriage, but it continued to run during the marriage, you have to look at a couple of things. One is, can you identify what the value of the business was as of the date of the marriage? What then did each party contribute to the sustenance or growth of the business during the marriage? That doesn't necessarily mean that, if the business is a pizza parlor, then not both people don't have to be on site tossing the dough and running the register. But if one spouse takes care of the child rearing and, the house cleaning and all of that component of a marriage so that the other party can be on site at the pizza parlor, that's contributing to the business. It's just doing it in a different way. So it all has to be looked at together. And it overlaps both alimony and equitable distribution. So you have to look at how the business fits into both of those things.
What role do business valuations play in divorce cases, and who performs those valuations?
Business valuations are performed by forensic accountants. There are a number of really excellent forensic accountants who work in New Jersey. They work in the divorce space. They also work sometimes in business litigation space and tax space. But it's very important to have an accurate valuation of the business, especially sometimes you have to have a look back. You have to go back and figure out what was the business worth on this date, and then what is it worth now that we've decided to get divorced on the date that we've determined is the end of the marriage. So there can be a lot of recreation of records and a determination of that. And as we all know, lawyers do not go to math school. So we really rely on the forensic accountants to come up with the valuations, and they have to testify if we go to trial about how they reach their conclusions and what the numbers really mean. How
do courts evaluate goodwill, particularly the difference between personal goodwill and, that enterprise goodwill?
So that is a really important distinction. Again, I am not a forensic accountant, but the way I try to explain goodwill to my clients is personal goodwill is something that is specific to an individual. So it's your personal reputation. It's, name recognition of you personally. So if you're looking for a lawyer and you know my name from my podcast, or you saw me in court and you're coming to me to represent you, that's personal goodwill. That's not something I can job out to other people. You're hiring me for those reasons. Enterprise goodwill is more like business reputation, brand, and often I see it more often with businesses that can be, for example, sold. So if I make widgets, and I have made the best widget in New Jersey for the last 30 years, there's a goodwill that comes with the brand. You think widgets, you think me, but you think my company. And I can sell the ability to manufacture and distribute those widgets separate from myself. So that's enterprise goodwill. And that's a quantifiable number by a forensic expert. They can determine that, all right, the factory is worth this much. Accounts receivable is worth this much. Current inventory is worth this much. And the otherwise intangible goodwill is worth this much in a sale or an equitable distribution situation. Personal goodwill often can't be sold, but it's often reflected in income. So it comes into play more on the alimony side, in my experience, than it does in the equitable distribution side.
So if one spouse actively runs the business and the other one does not, how does that, kind of affect that division and how they divide things up?
Well, you have to look at what are each party bringing to the marriage as a whole. One's building the business, is the other one supporting that in other ways, in unseen ways, by taking on more than their fair share of the childcare, by deciding not to pursue things in their own career to further support this spouse and that business. Do they get a job opportunity in another state that they forego because the business is in New Jersey? That's a sacrifice that they've made, and that has helped the business. And who's on site every day for the business? Who's at home? Maybe it's a business that almost runs itself. You've got a capable manager, so one party's name is on the business, but they're playing golf most of the time. So are they actively growing new business, or is the business growing by itself? All of these things come into play. That's why having a good valuation and a good forensic analysis of how the business operates is important.
What options are available if both spouses are co-owners but no longer want to operate the business together?
This is one, not unlike a real estate asset where they both own it. You don't want to be in business with somebody you can't stand anymore. So you can either become a silent partner and, either trust one to manage the business, because a rising tide lifts all boats. So if you trust them to manage it, you get your income, but you're not involved anymore. Everybody hires a manager to run the business gets sold, or one party buys out the other one, and the business keeps operating with only one of them reaping the future benefits.
Can one spouse, just like you said, buy out the other's interest? But how is that kind of structured financially, though, if that gets put into play?
So that can be flexible. There can be a payment plan. There can be a lump sum buyout. Somebody takes out a business loan to buy out their spouse, so they are the owner in the same way they would any other business partner that they wanted to buy out. Or you get creative and you do an offset. So one party keeps the house and the other party gets the business, and we just do the paperwork, but we decide that those things are roughly equivalent. It really depends on the dollars and cents.
So how do courts handle situations where income from the business is disputed or maybe even unclear, Alix?
That's where a good forensic valuation is important, because my client can't just say the business is worth this much, or this is all my income, and we're not going to look at the fact that the business pays for my car or whatever. So forensic valuations can do two things related to a business. They can do the value of the actual business. They can also do a lifestyle analysis for somebody who makes their income from a business. So even if you're a W-2 employee from your marital business or your family business, if you're paying your kids' preschool out of the business, things that a lot of people do, and I'm not here to judge your tax decisions on that score, but people do that. They don't contribute out of pocket to their health insurance. The health insurance is entirely covered by the business. That all adds value to their compensation as well. So a court is going to need more than either parties say so or either attorneys say so. They need testimony, and they need it by a certified expert.
What happens if a spouse believes the other is underreporting business income during the divorce?
Everybody always believes suddenly that there's a whole lot of cash that they never saw before. That is one of the things that a forensic evaluator can look at. So what they'll look at then is a comparison of what your declared income is versus your marital expenses. So if your marital expenses and your income are fairly close, then there's probably not a lot of hidden cash. But if your lifestyle exceeds your income by $50,000 a year, and you're not accruing debt on credit cards or in some other way, where is that money coming from? Sometimes it doesn't come from the business. Sometimes it's, one spouse doesn't realize that their partner's family has been subsidizing them for years. There are a lot of things that come out during a divorce, but a forensic evaluator can go back and recreate and determine what the actual income, what the actual lifestyle, what the actual debt is attributable to the marriage, and how does that relate to the business?
How do business interests intersect with alimony or child support calculations?
So it's important to not double count value. If you're looking at the value of a business for equitable distribution purposes, that should not overlap with alimony purposes. So the income, we have to separate the income from the standalone value of the business. A lot of times people want to double count that. They say, well, the business makes this much money. Yes, the business has its own existence separate and apart from your spouse. Your spouse takes home X amount of value, and we add those perks back in. So, in addition to maybe what their W-2 income is, we know what their actual income is. That's what we use when we're figuring out the child support and the alimony. And we try not to double count those dollars.
For business owners who are considering divorce, what is the most important thing they should understand before taking any legal steps?
I think one of the hard truths is your spouse's attorney gets to look at a lot of information that you may prefer that they not look at. That doesn't mean all of it goes to court, or all of it would be admissible, but they get to look. And you got to kind of wrap your head around that. The more you try and resist that, or the more you try and block that, the more trouble you're going to get in, the longer and the more expensive the divorce is going to be. So make sure, speak with your accountant, make sure you're up to date on your tax filings and your, business end of year reports, things like that. It's going to save you a lot of effort down the line, because it's much cheaper for you and your accountant to make sure your books are up to date than to allow a forensic accountant who's charging significantly more by the hour to create documents that you should have done in the first place. And talk to your lawyer. Tell your lawyer what's going on. I'm not here to personally judge you, but I am here to personally protect you and advise you. So if I know that, if this gets before a judge, there's going to be what we call a Sheridan referral to the IRS, I'm going to warn you about that. I'm going to let you know you may be stepping into a situation that puts you at risk. What is that worth to you?
Miss Alix, thank you so much.
Thank you, Evan.
That's a wrap on today's episode on For Better or For Court. If you or your spouse owns a business and you're facing divorce, visit HeymanFletcherLaw.com to connect with Alix Claps and to understand how New Jersey courts approach business valuation and division. Make sure you leave a review, and subscribe to the show so you don't miss the next episode. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.